You ever been blindsided by your own child? I mean, you spend decades raising them, teaching them right from wrong, and then bam, they hit you with a plot twist straight out of a soap opera. What would you do if your own son walked into your kitchen and told you to pack your bags because you're moving out and your daughter-in-law's mother is moving in? I thought I'd seen it all, till the doorbell rang and everything changed. Trust me, you won't believe who was standing on the other side door, what happened next. There are moments in life that sneak up on you, like a cat ready to pounce, and leave you wondering if you've somehow wandered into the wrong sitcom. For me, that moment came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening. I was elbow deep in ground beef, humming along to Fleetwood Mac's Go Your Own Way, and thinking about how I'd finally mastered my mother's meatloaf recipe after only 30 years of trying. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of onions and garlic, and I was feeling pretty pleased with myself. That's when my son Miles strolled in. Now, let me tell you, I know my son. I know every freckle on his face, every cowlick in his hair, and every single one of his I'm about to ask for money or confess something ridiculous looks. And that's exactly the look he had as he leaned against the counter, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape route. I should have known right then that something was up, but I was too busy trying to keep the raw meat from sticking to my wedding ring. He cleared his throat, which is never a good sign. Mom, pack your bags. You're going to live with my mother-in-law. I froze spatula in midair and stared at him. For a split second, I wondered if I'd misheard him. Maybe he'd said, pass the bags, or do you want to live with my mother-in-law? As if that was a normal question. But no, he was looking at me with that earnest, slightly panicked expression he used to get when he'd broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. Excuse me? Said my voice a little higher than usual. Did I hear that right? Are you feeling okay? Did you hit your head at work? He shook his head, all serious, and I noticed a bead of sweat forming at his temple. No, Mom. April and I are moving into your house. You'll stay in the little room at Marcia's. It's just easier for us, double quotes, easier for who? Exactly. I thought, but didn't say. I was still trying to process what he'd just told me. My house, the one I'd spent years making into a home, with my favorite curtains and the creaky floorboard in the hallway that only I knew how to avoid. The house where I'd raised him, patched up his scraped knees, and taught him how to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. He wanted me to just pack up and move out to the little room at his wife's mother's house, no less. I looked at him, apron still tied around my waist, hands covered in ground beef, and wondered if I was being pranked. Was there a hidden camera somewhere? Was Ashton Kutcher about to jump out from behind the fridge and yell, "You've been punked"? But Miles's face was deadly serious, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he meant every word. Miles, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. Are you sure you've thought this through? I mean, your wife's mother and I get along just fine at family gatherings, but living together? In her house? In the little room in the back? He nodded, but I could see the uncertainty flickering in his eyes. It's just, with the new baby coming, we need more space. And your house is perfect. It has the backyard, the nursery, and it's closer to work for both of us. Marcia's house is, well, it's cozy. And you'd have your own space, just for a little while until we get on our feet. I wanted to laugh or cry. Or maybe both. I thought about all the times I'd put his needs before mine. All the sacrifices I'd made as a single mom, and now here he was, asking me to give up my home so he and his wife could have an easier life. I knew he didn't mean to hurt me, but the sting was there all the same. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Miles, I love you and I want to help you, but this is a big ask. Have you talked to April's mother about this? Does she even know I'd be moving in? He hesitated, and that told me everything I needed to know. We were going to talk to her, but I wanted to ask you first, of course, because why not spring this on both of us at the same time? I glanced at the clock, wondering if it was too early for a glass of wine. My mind raced with questions. What would my friends say? Would I have to give up my book club, my garden, my independence? Before I could say another word, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and unexpected, breaking the tension like a dropped plate. Miles's face went from anxious to downright terrified. He looked at me, then at the door, his complexion turning a shade paler than the flower. On my countertop? Who could that be? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard. I think it's her. And just like that, my ordinary Tuesday evening turned into the beginning of a story I never saw coming. Now let me ask you, have you ever had a moment where time just stops? Really stops? Like the universe is holding its breath and waiting to see what you'll do next? That was me, spatula in hand, heart pounding so loud I was sure Miles could hear it. My son's face, which just moments ago had the smug confidence of a man with a brilliant plan, suddenly drained of all color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost story. Worse, his mother-in-law. And let me tell you, if you've ever met Marcia, you'd know that's not much of an exaggeration. Who could that be? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my insides felt like a washing machine on spin cycle. I glanced down at my hands, still covered in ground beef, and wondered if I should wash them or just keep holding onto the spatula like a security blanket. Miles stammered, "I'll get it." He shuffled toward the door, shoulders hunched as if he could make himself invisible. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of dread and curiosity. Was this the universe's idea of a joke? Was I about to be ambushed by a camera crew? Or was this just my luck, my son plotting to move me out, and his mother-in-law showing up at the exact wrong moment? The door creaked open, and there she was, Marcia, the woman who once told me my potato salad was interesting, and not in a good way. She stood in the doorway, purse clutched to her chest like a shield, eyes narrowed and lips pursed, as if she was about to deliver a verdict on my entire existence. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, not a strand out of place, and her shoes looked like they'd never touched a speck of dirt. I, on the other hand, was wearing my oldest slippers and an apron with a suspicious tomato stain. "Hello, Miles. Hello, Joyce," she said, her voice as smooth and cold as a marble countertop. She gave me a look that could curdle milk, and I suddenly felt like I was back in high school, being judged by the popular girls for wearing the wrong brand of jeans. "Marcia," I managed, forcing a smile. "What a surprise." She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the kitchen like a general inspecting the troops. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Oh, not at all," I said, trying to sound casual, though my mind was racing. Was she here because she'd heard about Miles's little plan? Was this some kind of intervention? Or was she just here to critique my housekeeping? Miles hovered awkwardly by the door, looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. Mom and I were just talking." Marcia arched an eyebrow. "Oh, about what?" I shot Miles a look that said, "Your move, buddy." He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a goldfish gasping for air. "We were just, talking about the baby and, space." For the baby?" Marcia's eyes narrowed even further. "Space? Well, I suppose that's important. Babies do take up a lot of room, don't they?" She set her purse down on the counter right next to my mixing bowl and folded her arms. "So, what's the plan?" I could feel the tension in the room ratchet up another notch. I glanced at the clock, wishing I could fast forward through this entire conversation. Well, Miles was just telling me about his. Marcia turned to me, her expression unreadable. "And what do you think of this idea?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Honestly, Marcia, I'm still processing. It's not every day your son tells you to pack your bags and move in with your mother-in-law." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "No, I suppose it isn't." She looked at Miles, who was now studying his shoes as if they held the secrets of the universe. Miles, did you really think this through? Did you think about how your mother might feel? Or how I might feel, for that matter? Miles, finally, looked up, his face red. I just thought it would be easier for everyone. Marcia shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Easier for who? Exactly. You, April? A teed? Or did you think your mother and I would just become instant best friends, sharing recipes and knitting scarves in the back room? Couldn't help it, Ty snorted. The image of Marcia and me sitting side by side in matching rocking chairs was so absurd I almost burst out laughing. But I caught myself, not wanting to make things worse for Miles, who looked like he might faint at any moment. Marcia turned back to me, her tone softening just a bit. Look, Joyce, I know this is a lot, okay? And I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. Ugh. But I don't think either of us wants to be forced into this situation. I like my space, and I'm sure you like yours. I nodded, relief flooding through. Me? You have no idea. Miles let out a shaky breath, clearly realizing his brilliant plan was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. I wanted to do what was best for my family. Marcia patted his arm. Sometimes, Miles, what's best for your family is letting people stay where they belong. The three of us stood there in the kitchen, the smell of meatloaf filling the air, and for the first time that evening, I felt a little less alone. Maybe this wasn't the disaster I'd feared. Maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out together. But not under the same roof. And as Marcia reached for her purse and gave me a conspiratorial wink, I realized that sometimes the best way to handle a doorbell dilemma is with a little honesty, a dash of humor, and a whole lot of heart. We all sat down in the living room, and let me tell you, the tension was so thick you could slice it with a butter knife, and I was half tempted to go back to the kitchen. Kanan, get one. The three of us perched on the edge of our seats, like actors, waiting for the curtain to rise on a play we hadn't rehearsed. Miles sat between us, looking like a little boy caught between two school principals, while Marcia and I eyed each other with the wary respect of two women who'd seen a lot of life and weren't about to be pushed around by anyone, least of all a well-meaning but clueless son. Miles cleared his throat, clearly hoping to regain some control of the situation. So, I just thought with the baby coming and us needing more space, it made sense for us to move in here. Mom could stay at your place, Marcia, just for a while until we get settled. It's just practical. Marcia didn't even let him finish. Miles, you can't just move your mother out of her own house. Where's your sense? Her voice was sharp but not unkind. She looked at him the way you look at a puppy who's just chewed up your favorite slippers, equal parts exasperation and affection. Miles shrank in his seat, shoulders slumping. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered he was the one who'd started this whole mess, and my sympathy dried up faster than a puddle in July. Marcia turned to me, her expression softening just a touch. You know, Joyce, my house is very cozy, but I'm not sure you'd be comfortable there. And besides, who would make the meatloaf? She gave me a sly smile, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of camaraderie in her eyes. Maybe we weren't so different after all. I looked at Miles, then at Marcia, and suddenly the absurdity of it all hit me. Here we were, three grown adults, arguing over who would live where, as if we were playing a game of musical chairs and someone was about to be left standing. I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. The sound surprised even me, echoing through the room and breaking the tension like a pin popping a balloon. Well, said, wiping tears from my eyes, maybe you two should move in together and leave me out of it. I meant it as a joke, but for a split second, I wondered what that would actually look like. Marcia and me, sharing a house, bickering over the thermostat and the remote control. But maybe also sharing a glass of wine at the end of a long day. Stranger things had happened. For a moment, nobody said a word. Miles looked at me, wide-eyed. as if I'd just suggested we all join the circus. But then, to my surprise, Marcia started to laugh too. It was a deep, genuine laugh, the kind that makes you feel lighter just hearing it. "Maybe we should," she said, shaking her head. "At least then we'd know the meatloaf would be edible." The three of us sat there laughing together, and for the first time all evening, I felt the knot in my stomach begin to loosen. Maybe this wasn't the disaster I'd feared. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this mess with our dignity and our sense of humor intact. Miles, bless his heart, tried to steer the conversation back to his original plan. "I just want what's best for everyone," he said, his voice small. "I thought this would make things easier." Marcia reached over and patted his hand. "Miles, sometimes what seems easiest isn't always best. Your mother has built a life here. This is her home. You can't just uproot her because it's convenient." I nodded, grateful for her support. "I appreciate that you want to take care of your family, Miles, but I'm not ready to give up my home. Not yet. Maybe there's another solution." We sat in silence for a moment, each of us lost in thought. I glanced around the living room, at the photos on the walls, the worn but comfortable furniture, the little knickknacks I'd collected over the years. This house was more than just four walls and a roof, was a part of me, and I wasn't about to let it go without a fight. Marcia broke the silence. "You know, when my husband passed, I thought about selling my house and moving in with my daughter. But I realized I needed my own space, my own routine. It's not selfish to want that. It's human." I smiled at her, feeling a newfound respect. "Thank you, Marcia. That means a lot." Miles looked between us, clearly realizing he was outnumbered. "So, what do we do?" I shrugged. "We figure it out together. Maybe you and April can look for a place nearby. I can help with the baby, but I need my own space too." Marcia nodded. "And if you ever need a break from the chaos, my door is always open. So don't expect me to make the meatloaf." We all laughed again, the tension finally melting away. It wasn't the solution Miles had hoped for, but it was a start. And as I looked at my son and his mother-in-law, I realized that sometimes the best way to handle a showdown is with a little honesty, a lot of laughter, and the courage to stand your ground. As the evening wore on and the conversation turned to lighter topics, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My home was safe, my family was together, and for the first time in a long time, I knew everything was going to be okay. In the end, Miles's brilliant plan turned out to be about as sturdy as a wet paper bag in a rainstorm. It didn't take long for reality to catch up with him faster than you can say bad idea. The very next morning, as I was enjoying a rare moment of peace with my coffee and the crossword, my phone rang. It was Miles's wife, April, and from the sound of her voice, I could tell she was not calling to discuss baby names or share a new recipe. "Mom, did Miles really tell you to move out of your own house?" she asked, her tone somewhere between disbelief and outrage. I could almost picture her, standing in her kitchen, one hand on her hip, the other waving a spatula for emphasis. I told her the truth, and there was a long pause before she let out a sigh that could have powered a wind turbine. "I'm so sorry, I don't know what he was thinking. We'll figure something out, but you are not going anywhere." I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes it takes a strong woman to set things straight. And April was clearly up to the task. Later that day, Marcia called. "Well, Joyce, it seems we've both been volunteered for a new adventure," she said, her voice laced with dry humor. "I suppose we should be grateful they didn't try to move us into a retirement home together?" I laughed, the tension from the night before finally melting away. "Can you imagine? We'd probably end up running the place within a week." She chuckled, and before I knew it, we'd made plans to meet for lunch, just the two of us. No children, no drama, just a chance to share a meal and maybe a little perspective. That afternoon, Marcia arrived at my house with a bottle of wine tucked under her arm and a mischievous glint in her eye. "I thought we could use this more than the kids," she said, handing it to me. We settled into the living room, the same room that had been the scene of so much tension just the night before, and poured ourselves generous glasses as we sipped and swapped stories. I realized how much we actually had in common. We'd both raised families, lost sleep over our children's choices, and learned to laugh at life's little absurdities. We even discovered a shared love of old movies and a mutual disdain for low-sodium soup. Oh no! As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Marcia and I found ourselves reminiscing about the early days of motherhood, the sleepless nights, the endless laundry, the way our children could make us laugh and cry in the same breath. You know, Marcia said, swirling her wine, "I always thought I'd be the one in charge, but it turns out the kids have their own ideas." I nodded, thinking of Miles's sheepish face and April's exasperated phone call. All right. They sure do, but I guess that's the way it's supposed to be. We raise them to be independent, and then we're surprised when they try to take over. We both laughed, the sound warm and genuine. And for the first time, I felt a sense of camaraderie with Marcia that went beyond our shared title of mother-in-law. By the time the bottle was empty, we'd made a pact, no matter what our children cooked up next, we'd face it together with humor, grace, and maybe a little more wine. As Marcia gathered her things to leave, she turned to me and said, "You know, I think we're going to be just fine. And if they ever try to move us out again, we'll just switch houses and see how they like it." I grinned, imagining the look on Miles's face if he came home to find Marcia and me running a bed and breakfast out of his childhood home. "Deal," I said, and we hugged. Two women who'd weathered more than a few storms and come out stronger for it. And me. I stayed right where I belonged in my own home with my own kitchen, my own rules, and my own slightly overcooked meatloaf. I tended my garden, hosted my book club, and even started a new hobby, painting. Something I'd always wanted to try but never found the time for. Miles and April found a small apartment nearby, and I became the world's happiest grandma, free to spoil my grandchild and then send them home when I needed a nap. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm. But I carried with me the lessons of those chaotic days, because here's what I learned. Sometimes life throws you a curveball, and all you can do is laugh. Pour yourself a glass and remember who's really in charge. It's easy to get caught up in the drama, to worry about what might happen or what others expect of you. But at the end of the day, your home is your sanctuary, your rules are your own, and your happiness is worth fighting for. And if you're lucky, I'll find a friend in the most unexpected place, even if she once called your potato salad interesting. So, if you ever find yourself facing a family plan that makes you want to run for the hills, take a deep breath, pour a glass of wine, and remember, you've survived worse, and you're not alone. It's a whole sisterhood of women out there, laughing, loving, and living life on their own terms. And if you ever need a reminder, just come back here. I'll have a story, a smile, and maybe even a slice of meatloaf waiting for you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales, laughter, and a little wisdom from one woman to another. Because if we can't laugh at life's surprises, what can we do? See you next time.